One more time for the bell. Did anyone remember that sound from school? Did anyone have that bell sound at school? I'm finding it quite triggering. It's activating something from my primary school days. They're all sort of digital now, their school bells. All right. I'm going to just launch in and then everyone will get the message or not, and we'll go from there. How was lunch? Did you meet a few? I met 5 new people, and I went deep. Like we cut the niceties. We went right to. Did anyone else have some really gritty conversations in a good way? No, just me and the Keishas. Good. No one have? Yeah, you good. Go you. Someone that you can sort of follow up with maybe. Beautiful. I love that. Excellent. Excellent. Are we ready for some more learnings? The next 4 presentations are kind of a chance to see the beautiful work that's happening amongst our Landcare and other rehab and conservation groups, which is exciting, and we're going to hear 4 different stories. The first one is from Stephen Thatcher, who's going to be talking about the Liddell Recreation Area and Landcare's instrumental role in improving the environment. Please welcome Stephen. Hi, I didn't introduce myself. Hi. Now that's your clicker. Mm-hmm. And if that's annoying, you can put it out of the way. Yeah.
Hello everybody, I'm Stephen Thatcher. I'm a member of the Hunter Region Landcare Network, and I've been a member of Lake Liddell land manager as well. So I'm going to talk about Lake Liddell's recreation areas improvement over the past nearly 20 years or 30 years or something, I can't remember. 94, 2004, you can do the maths, 2004 till now. So Lake Liddell Recreation Area Reserve was gazetted in as a Crown Manager Reserve on the 21st of August 1970. And Lake Liddell, as you know, was constructed as, or you might know, Lake Liddell was constructed as the cooling water storage for Liddell Power Station. And that was owned by the Electricity Commission. The first planting occurred in 1976 when the land was donated by Elcom. So I'm just a bit behind, so yes. Then in October 2004, the Crown Lands Department called for expressions of interest in forming a new board to manage the trust. The previous trust had been disbanded, and Andrew Martin, a fellow member of Hunter Region Landcare Network, and I went along and decided to join the trust. Because we're also members of the Landcare Network, we sought approval from the network's committee to make Lake Liddell a Landcare Reserve, a Landcare site. And I'll just go back one. That's Lake Liddell as it is now, about 2004 onwards. And if I get this one working, this one here, that's it. So our boundary virtually goes along there. But the first Tandera Reserve is a little block of land. I can't work this thing. There. Hooray! That's the first planting. There's a couple of acres of plantings. So, as I said, we formed the Landcare as a reserve because Andrew and I were on the Landcare Network. And both the Trust and HRLN set about a plan of restoration for the degraded land within the boundary of the reserve. And it was identified that tree planting, weed removal, erosion control, salinity and feral animals control were aspects of the network would be involved in. And from 2007, we started a big tree planting every 2 years or so. But before that, we had a little guide of how to go about tree planting, because we had another involvement by power plant, a Sydney mob who came up and spent the whole weekend there, and we decided, what can you do to help us? And tree planting was one of them. So in 2005-06, they planted 1,000 trees to get us started. In 2007, we got an environmental grant and we planted 10,000 trees with the help of scouts and guides. And that's just some of the trees, and that's some of the mob who were in Landcare at the time. Paul Mullane's still around here, you might have met him today. So that goes on to, this is a group of scouts planting, and that was the results a year later. You can actually see that the trees were growing, but in 2007, where we started out, you can see there's very little tree growth there. So we got the scouts, the guides, and the community involved in planting trees. One thing about having scouts and guides and the community involved, you've got to have a quality control person to go along behind, because, as you know, some of the scouts and guides are too busy racing each other, putting trees, to do it satisfactorily. So you have a quality control person going along and just making sure that they're all planted right. Now, I've gone back, yes. Now, they ask about support for Landcare, and our support comes from many different organisations and people. As you can see from the slide there, we've had much support from AGL, who own the lake and are the big power supply operators in the valley, from Glencore, Bengalla and Hunter Operations. They're all mining companies. They do provide a great help to local services there who ask for it, as well as mining. They do provide community support as well. So they're not all bad. And Hunter Local Land Services provided grants too, and their previous iterations. So Muswellbrook Shire Council have also provided us grants to get trees, get equipment. We've had a crew from Newcastle Permanent Building Society come up, Newcastle TAFE students come up, World Youth Day participants also planted trees for us. So, and Cumberland Player Seeds were a major sponsor in doing the plantings up there for this project especially. So then, with partners such as these, we've managed to plant over 22,000 plants. Erosion points have been stabilised, and we've entered a routine with weed and feral animal control, and that's ongoing. And a property vegetation plan with Hunter Central Rivers Catchment Management Authority was entered into in 2007. And we have established flora and endangered communities plantings for the Central Hunter Ironbark, Spotted Gum, Grey Gum Forest. Now that's a mouthful, so I decided to put it in here just to test me out. And that's in the northern New South Wales, North Coast and Sydney bioregions. So that's a big undertaking. So we've planted, as you can see on the, what's that? My left. That was the first planting we did up there, was by ripping and big heavy machinery in there, mulching and everything like that, and seeds growing, and you can see a few of the plants there. Actually, there's a lot of plants in there if you take away all the weeds. Now, some of the key challenges are the weather. As we all know, weather plays a big part. So from when we started this project, and you can see the photo point on my right and the photo point on my left, the conditions changed dramatically from being very lush to very dry. Inexperienced planters, as I've said, they all need someone to go after them. Time allowed for volunteers. You can't just rush in with volunteers and plant everything. You've got to do it in their time. And we've used some echidna tree guards. If you don't know what they are, they're a wire mesh tree guard about that high that stops cattle running into and destroying your plantings. And setting up the photo points help track progress. Now, one going up. Battery might have gone. Anyway, here we are. Our key learnings from this: have a plan and adjust it when necessary. It's no use going ahead with a plan if it's not going to work. You've got to adjust it when it's necessary. And use the resources available to you. So during the flood times and during everything else, people weren't actually working on our land, so we had them working elsewhere and using our equipment. Use the time available you can, so whatever comes up, you've got to get in there when you can. And you never know what will be around the corner, so you have to be optimistic. We wouldn't have had all the help we did if we weren't optimistic. And key takeaway message: have a vision and involve as many participants as possible. Just go back. That photo on my right shows Hunter Valley Operations volunteers. They came in one day. They planted 420 trees and put in all the tree guards necessary to finish off our project in one day. They were amazing, and they really got stuck in and did it for us. You might be able to see some of the tree guards they put in, but that preparation for them, they came up 2 days before and organised it. They came up a week before, organised the site, and they came up on the day and had everything prepared, marquees, breakfast, everything like that for the volunteers. So it's amazing what you can do. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we need to get Stephen his own TikTok channel teaching young people how to plant trees, but that's just me. There was a lot of people nodding in agreement when you talked about the Scouts. We've all been there. How great to have such a continued contribution to Landcare. And I know there are a lot of you in the room who've done 20, 30, 40, whatever years. That's pretty amazing and wonderful to see. Our next presentation is coming from the Hunter Region Landcare Network and local Landcare groups, and it's about recent riparian projects. And our presenter today is Stacy Mail from the HRLN.
Hi everyone, I'm Stacy from Hunter Region Landcare. I'm the local Landcare Coordinator for Lower Hunter. I've met many of you before, but not everyone, so let's get started. So in the Lower Hunter, I thought I'd just briefly mention some of the groups that we've been working with on riparian works in the past few years. Conjue Landcare on the creek in the valley, Wollombi Landcare on also Conjue Creek or Wollombi Brook, depends where you mark your cutoff point, where it changes name. Hunter River with Los Cantara Landcare recently, and Lambs Valley Landcare. And the last one, which we're going to focus on today, is Sustaining the Williams Valley up in Dungog. So the site that this wonderful group in this photo, some of them are represented there. Two of the key drivers are here today. Initiated is this southern bank of the Williams River at Frank Robinson Park. It's bounded by Kuriai Bridge on Stroud Road on the right, and the railway bridge site goes underneath and along the bank just there. So this was before 2017. So this picture, just to cheat a little bit, goes back to about 2008, but it gives you an idea of what the site would have looked like before the project was started. So it was pretty degraded, very cleared to the edge, with the exception of a couple little patches of casuarina and some of the weeping lily pili, Waterhausia floribunda. There was no native understory, little recruitment happening, very weed dominated by invasive vines, woody weeds, including privet, tobacco. I'm not going to go into all the details of the weeds and herbaceous plants. Okay. So when the group decided to take on this project back in 2017, we applied for a small grant from Hunter Water to begin. And luckily that grant was approved. And we began first making a plan with a contractor to begin the ecological restoration of this EEC community. So the whole idea with this was not to just plant trees, but to actually restore the weeping lily lowland rainforest of subtropical Australia, Suballiance 26. Okay, so a very specific outcome that we were looking to achieve. So stage one involved weed control, just prepping the site and getting it ready to put in the first lot of plants. So the sun-loving species went in first in a successional sort of hierarchy. Couple examples here of the black plum and the Sinum glandulosum. Sorry, I'm intermixing some common names with some scientific names. That tends to happen a lot in Landcare. And on the right, an example of what one of the first plantings looked like in 2018. Okay, so fast forward time a little bit. Now we're into 2020, and you can see that the plants are starting to look pretty good. They're starting to establish themselves already. And you wonder during that period, you might stop and think, well, how did they thrive during the drought? So they were actually planted, when we were having dry times and got to that stage. And I think speaking with the group, just put it down to really good planting methods, making sure that the wells were deep. They had plenty of water going in. We had a little bit of water crystals, fertilizer, et cetera, to help them on their way. So the group was regularly going and attending the site monthly, doing weeding. And there's a few of them you can see with their heads down doing their work. Okay, this is a little snippet of a video created. Now bear with the first little bit where I introduce myself in a bit of a lengthy process, but it gives you some idea. It gives you a nice overview of the surroundings and how amazing this site is. Hi, it's Stacy here from Hunter Region Landcare Network. I'm in Dungog today with the Sustaining the Williams Valley group. They're a community association involved in landcare and sustainability issues. Behind me, the group's working to finish off the planting we did today for the Weeping Lily Pili Rainforest Regeneration Project. I'm here with Judy from Sustaining the Williams Valley Group.
After the flood, the Great Flood in 2015, it was very, very degraded. And it is further down and further up. This area was Weeping Lily Pili Rainforest once upon a time, and we would like to try and reproduce it.
Here we are on the Landcare site just after a major 50-year flood event. Everything here was submerged at its peak. New saplings and trees planted over the past 3 years were all pushed over by the force of the water. While some soil was washed away, all was not lost. Many of the plants remain, clinging to the bank by their roots, and with a little bit of help will recover. Though this is a setback, it shows how important it is to continue with this revegetation project until all the layers of rainforest vegetation are intact, become self-sustaining, and able to withstand floods and erosion. Okay, here's a couple of photos just to further drive home the point of what the water levels look like. This is taken from the bridge looking back towards the railway line. That was only 8 days after that community planting. So you can imagine the group was pretty devastated when that happened. Fast forward to today. Let me just go back one more step. I failed to mention before that planting, the group was doing pretty much all the work on the project. The contractor had finished up on their own. And in July 2020, we sourced some extra funding from the Greater Bank to continue. So I just want to acknowledge them. And this is where we're up to today. Okay, so it's looking much better, and it's actually better than this angle actually portrays, because that last section there next to the bridge, we have to keep a lot of it clear because of the power lines. So if you can see through all the layers further up, it's looking a lot more intact and all the layers coming together. So these are just a few things that I won't go through all of these, but one of the big successes on the project has been the fact that about 40 different species have already successfully established. There were some more that planted, some did well, and some not so much. The first platypus was spotted October 2022 in the area, just that little area. Success of this project has led to the next stage. We've started already working on just downstream under the bridge on the next bit at Abbott's Flat. The challenges along the way, one of the big ones has been stakeholder relationships. We had to manage working with council and some communication issues and things like that. Prioritizing regular communication is key, and you really have to keep on top of that. And the other challenge is always managing the short funding time frame. So we never have enough time to see through the projects in the way that we'd like. Key takeaways, select your patch. For anyone in community or anybody wanting to take on a new project, engage with the stakeholders. Just start, set an example, be positive, and people will come on board. There's little to be done, or there's little you can do to prevent nature taking its course. So don't put all your effort in one season. Realize that it's a long-term proposition. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Keep good records to monitor your progress, and that's really invaluable for learning and for future funding, to continue your good work. And we think, again, the planting method and timing was really critical to make or break the project. What's next? Again, Abbott's Flat, which we've already begun, and now the group's even toying with the idea of working on the north side of that bank as well. We're working with, through Landcare, the Landcare Network, we're working with community and stakeholders looking at a riparian project across Maitland for dry rainforest as well. Focusing on education and revegetation. And we'll be looking to engage with, the greater community. Landcare groups and members, the more I speak to people, they're all crying out for a catchment-based approach to restoring landscapes. And this forum is, exactly what that's about as well. So we're hoping to be able to, keep continuing our reach. Through collaboration and action, what can we collectively achieve?
Not only can she do her best news reporter, she's also perfectly timed. Thank you so much, Stacey. That was great. I loved seeing my new friend Judy. Hi, Judy, wherever you are, in action. Actually, was it that Judy? Was that another? No, it was you, wasn't it? We had a big chat about climate anxiety. No? Yes, thank you. I was like, it looked like you. Oh, yeah. She was a bit like, no. I really enjoyed seeing the different species because we don't have those species, so that's just a personal thing. Thank you, Stacey. We're going to go to the Lower Wollombi Hunter River Red Gum project next. Say that quickly. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Tricia Hogbin from the Broke Bulga Landcare.
Okay, so today I'm talking about a Broke Bulga Landcare project restoring river red gum to Wollombi Brook catchment. Okay, so Eucalyptus comaidensis, or river red gum, once formed extensive stands all across the whole Hunter Valley, along the Hunter River, the Goulburn rivers and their tributaries, including Wollombi Brook. So Broke Bulga Landcare is aiming to restore river red gum to Wollombi Brook between the towns of Broke and Bulga, linking the two communities with a common goal. So it's a little project, but we wanted to step back and look outside of our sandbox and think about the bigger picture. So what we have here is we have the distribution of river red gum across New South Wales. The red dot is where is the Hunter Valley. So in the Hunter, Eucalyptus comaidensis, or river red gum, is listed as an endangered population. It's the only population east of the Great Dividing Range, and it's also part of an endangered ecological community. So when we're doing our little restoration project, we wanted to look at the bigger picture when planning it. So one of the threats for river red gum, the endangered population, is the planting of non-local provenance material. So you've seen many photos today. So what that means, I guess, is sourcing our seed locally. But you've seen many photos today where the area's just been totally cleared of vegetation. So when we lost our river red gums, we also lost genetic diversity in those river red gums. And so genetic diversity is really important for ensuring the persistence and long-term viability of our restoration projects, particularly so for eucalypts because they're preferential outcrossers. So a euc, rather than mate with a close sibling or a close relative, will outcross or hybridise with another species. So if our restoration plantings have low genetic diversity, we're just going to end up with hybrid offspring from our restoration sites, and we won't end up with what we're aiming to achieve. So what we wanted to do with our project was to, there was only a handful of plants that we could have used as seed sources if we were focusing on collecting material within Wollombi Brook. So I guess we were asking, is there sufficient genetic diversity within Wollombi Brook to enable our restoration sites to be resilient in the long term? So one thing I wanted to highlight with this project is that all along, so we're a very small group. Literally there's only probably half a dozen very active members, 30 or 40 members on the books. So we're focusing on designing our projects so they're very collaborative and establishing relationships with other people. So in the early days, we had a Hunting for Hunter River Red Gums project that the local land service coordinated. And through that, we found a number of mother trees or seed sources that we weren't aware of. And then we secured funding. So we want this to be a long-term project, a project that we're rolling out for the next 20 years or so. So we established a pilot project with a handful of landholders, and we secured funding through the Bushfire Wildlife Recovery Program, through the Hunter Region Landcare Network and local land services. So that could have just been a tree planting project. It's only a couple of years, but we used it as an opportunity to pilot our bigger project. So we collected seed from within Wollombi Brook catchment only, and Trees in Newcastle propagated those local provenance plants specifically for our project. And importantly, I'll come back to this later, they maintained maternal lines throughout. So they tracked which seedlings came from which mothers, because there's concerns about hybridisation in between the river red gum and the forest red gum. So if we discovered there were hybrids, we wanted to be able to pull those plants out of our plantings. What this meant is in year one, we couldn't do any plantings of river red gum because the plants were being propagated. So year one, we focused on weed control and planting associated species. We also partnered with the Research Centre for Ecosystem Resilience at the Botanic Gardens of Sydney, and also the Department of Planning and Environment Saving Our Species program. So there's a broader genetic project that was there was a whisper it was going to happen. We raised our project as an opportunity to test some of the questions that we have about restoring river red gum in the Hunter. I won't spend too much time on the genetic results because we don't have time, but I'll just highlight in brief. So what we detected was interregression or historic hybridisation within the Wollombi Brook population of river red gum. So what that means is about 20,000 years ago, a river red gum hybridised with a cabbage gum. We ended up with a hybrid offspring, so you've got a coastal species, inland species. That's probably the only reason why river red gum occurs on this coastal kind of environment. It hijacked some genes from a coastal species. So what we have on Wollombi Brook is still river red gum, or Eucalyptus camalliensis. It just hijacked a few coastal genes 20,000 years ago. But that means that we've got a distinct lineage that we want to keep within Wollombi Brook. We also discovered non-local provenance planted trees. So it looked like a natural patch of river red gum. We were really excited when we found it. It was naturally regenerating. There was 50 or so offspring. But the genetics showed that those individuals all originated from one or few planted individuals of Western provenance material. So those offspring... Actually, one thing I should mention, so we genotyped our mother trees that we collected seed from, and then we genotyped 20 seedlings from each of those mothers. And so what we discovered is that the offspring from that inbred non-local provenance patch were all hybrids with the cabbage gum, the Amphifolia. So we were able to pull those plants out of the plantings because they were non-local provenance and they were hybrids. So trees in Newcastle had to compost or toss those plants. They've still got one tray they can't let go of or can't bring themselves to destroy. There was a couple of instances where we found isolated individuals, a tree all by itself. It's got no one to mate with, so those seed are highly inbred or hybrid. But you have a nice stand at the Bulga travelling stock reserve, for example, nice big large population. There's no evidence of hybridisation within those natural stands, even though there's forest red gum co-occurring. We also, just by chance, we found one isolated plant tree. It broke, which we discovered its mother, or where they collected the seed from, was at Musselbrook. And so all those seed originating from that planted individual were super, super inbred. So again, we were able to pull those out of the plantings. Actually, I'll just jump ahead too quickly. How do I go back? And what we discovered looking at the whole Hunter region, so the Hunter population we discovered was part of the same genetic neighbourhood as the Murray-Darling Basin or all the other populations out west. So this has implications for not only our project, but sourcing material for the whole of the Hunter, is that it is relatively safe. So it's safe to supplement our plantings within the Hunter from material to the north or outside of the Hunter Valley, because we've lost so many individuals, we've lost genetic diversity. If we want our populations to survive in the long term, we need to bring in some of that additional genetic diversity. So before I talk about the implications, I just want to briefly highlight that one of the implications or learnings from the flood, so we had major floods in the first year of our planting. So all our plantings were like 1 or 2 metres under fast running floodwater, and we thought there's no way they will survive. The floodwaters receded and we lost very few plants. So we spent more on our guards or Hunter Region Landcare Network, spent more on the guards and the stakes than we did on our plants, even though our plants were propagated for us. So it's worth, if you're working in riparian areas, spending the money on those guards and on those stakes. This is one of our Landcare members, Bruce. We went and picked up, so there was some plantings by one of the local mines. After the flood, there was just plastic guards litting a public reserve. So we went through and picked all those up. So it's worthwhile spending money on good quality guards. I won't go through the genetic implications in details, but I just want to highlight that this was a little project that actually gave big insight into part of a bigger project because we had those connections. I won't go through those, but I'll go quickly. So we want to maximise genetic diversity by sourcing seed from multiple mother trees across multiple sites. We want to collect our seeds from big, large natural stands because we don't want our seeds to be hybrid or inbred. We want to avoid collecting from planted trees because they're, again, likely highly inbred and hybridising. We want to keep our Wollombi Brook lineage material to Wollombi Brook. We shouldn't plant it elsewhere, but it's safe to bring in material from elsewhere to Wollombi Brook. And So I just want to highlight that the collaboration, in this case, amplified the benefits. So by linking in with the researchers and other groups, we learnt a lot more. For example, the findings on maintaining maternal lines and being able to pull them out was published in a paper with the Botanic Gardens. And I'll just highlight that because what we found working on an iconic species, and Glenn mentioned earlier on today that the Local Land Services Iconic Species Project on Wollombi Brook, this forms part of it, and working on an iconic species on a project that had a high level of collaboration increased interest in the project. So, for example, there was recently a ABC landline story on the broader Hunter Valley project. So the fact that so I think it's really important for us to focus on those collaborations and to not be ashamed to grab onto those iconic species that people are really interested in.
Did you bring Bruce with you? Did he make? No. I thought when you had that slide up and you were talking about iconic species, I thought you were talking about Bruce. I was like, there he is. But no, he featured twice, several times. So the benefits of small land care groups. Now, I have to say, I wrote down a whole bunch of words I had not heard in sequence for a long time. That was hybridisation, genotyping, providence, maternal lines. It was very meaty, Tricia. Like, I felt like it was an episode of like Days of Our Lives if Costa had written it. Like it had it all. So well done. I feel like there's some really good stuff for the community to get behind there. Fascinating work, and I can't wait to see the River Red gums take off again. Are they planted now? They're in there. Very exciting. I think there's other groups that are working on that as well. Our last presentation before our Q&A. If you've got questions, make sure you're starting to think about those now. But we're going to talk to the Upper Yango Creek riparian revegetation project now, and it's my pleasure to welcome Jan Gillespie from the Upper Yango Landholders Association.
Good afternoon, everyone. As noted, I'm a member of the Upper Yango Landholders Association, which was formed after the 2019 bushfires. Prior to that, we were a group of landholders in a small valley. We'd see each other. We'd wave. A group of us might socially connect, but it was the bushfires that brought us together and enabled us to develop some common goals. As part of that, we applied for a number of grants. Sorry, Bob. And that has enabled us to start a number of projects. I'm about to show you a video which was put together under the auspices of Amanda and her colleagues at Hunter Landcare, which highlights some of the issues that we faced from 2019 through to the floods in 2022. So that'll give you a bit of an overview and a background to what we've been through in our valley. And it also, many of you may connect to what we've experienced, to what you've been through over the last few years as well. Anyway, here we go. I think. A few of the stars are here today. You might want to talk to them later.
Today we're in the upper reaches of Yango Creek, which flows into the Wollombi Brook and eventually down to the Hunter River. So this creek became quite badly eroded as a result of some severe storm events. And those storms came quite soon after bushfire, which had burnt a lot of the ground cover on the slopes of the hills. So when the stormwater hit the bed of the creek, it started chewing it out and causing head cut erosion, which is when the bed level of the creek drops. And all that sand can then move downstream and create problems where it can fill holes in the creek and smother aquatic habitat. So at the request of landholders, Hunter LLS came and inspected the site and walked the creek and identified the worst patches of erosion. We then engaged experts at Soil Conservation Service to come and assess the reach of the creek and provide some recommendations of what could be done to manage the points of active erosion on the creek.
So we were asked to come out, have a look at the landscape, and first undertake a geomorphic assessment that looked at about a 3-kilometre reach of Upper Yengo Creek to understand the character and behaviour of the river and identify areas that might need work or priority for actions. And we suggested prioritising 2 locations within the reach where we identified active eroding headcuts. One of the sites was a location where a headcut had formed with banks about 2 metres high. And we saw this headcut progress about 15 to 20 metres upstream. Usually with the Soil Conservation Service, we'd like to see more the soft actions such as riparian re-veg to help manage erosion, but these sites needed some more harder structures, so a rock bed control structure to stabilise the site and to minimise further bed erosion. We took a lot of time in taking levels and understanding the levels of the site and how the headcut was sitting within the floodplain. We brought about 300 tonnes of oversized boulders, and we also brought in cobble, which is a smaller size rock, and you need that to pack behind the bigger rocks. We also used geofabric, and we utilised, I think, 14-tonne excavator and an 8-tonne excavator.
The project here is about helping to manage erosion. So points along the creek where erosion's quite severe, we installed some bed control structures. Soon after construction, the site was impacted by a large flood, so we needed to do some repairs to one bed control. The other bed control held together really well. On other stretches of the creek, landholders have planted lots of native plants, and these plants' roots will help to hold the creek banks together in the future. The success of the project really relies on native vegetation to help prevent further erosion in the future.
So establishing a good riparian corridor so that the sediment coming off the landscape is captured and the flows can be slowed down before they reach the creek.
We worked with landholders to identify a plan to plant native trees and shrubs and put them back into the landscape.
As a community, we have come together and probably planted around about 1,600 tube stock, of which nearly a third of that was Lomandra. Now, Lomandra has been a key plant in providing stability along the toes of the creek, and once it's established, hopefully any future water flows won't take as much sediment away and will stabilise the creek's banks. We've also, after the second flood event, realised that a wider area of planting has to be undertaken at the tops of the creek banks, and so we've pulled back with our mowing and balancing that up with the need for a bit of protection around bushfires. There's been a lot more natural revegetation in that area, and it's allowed greater protection for small native species to move in and out of the creek area.
We recommend landholders with waterways running through their property consider those areas as sensitive areas. They need looking after. You could talk to your local Landcare group. You can contact local land services and we can help you work out a plan to manage these sensitive areas.
In the knowledge that we've gained in the planting, hopefully there will be a lot more shade created, suppressing the weeds that are currently there, and will allow us into future generations enjoy our property and the natural environment which will have been built. That's sort of the background and what's happened in our valley. In the period after the first lot of floods, we did some planting, but unfortunately we lost a lot of that during the subsequent floods. The use of grants really has saved some action in our valley, because without the grant we would not have been able to afford to get the stock to put in and a small amount of equipment and to be able to target some of the weeds. We didn't employ anyone to plant and we didn't employ anyone to do any of the preparation. That was all done by the landholders who became involved in the planting. Now, there were 10 landholders who became involved in planting, and at varying degrees. So again, it was, as it's been highlighted, the use of endemic species was very important. We use the guideline from Hunter Local Land Services, the riparian revegetation guide as part of our plans, and we access stock as part of our Foundation of National Parks and Wildlife. We access stock through Paul at Upper Hunter Land and trees in Newcastle. And as I said, Lamandra was a key area of that. Oh, sorry. Okay. After that, the focus was then to build the capacity of the community. A lot of them had not necessarily been involved in and had knowledge about revegetation. So the focus of that, we had a number of valley planting days. A number of our members attended various workshops in seed collection, plant propagation, again planting technique, which has already been identified as key, and plant identification, and we got going. What have been our successes? Well, planting has begun and it will continue. Weed management is underway. We've had propagation of endemic species. Paul's been up and some of our local landholders have been propagating from seeds collected in our valley. And as has been mentioned by other speakers, the development of partnerships with key stakeholders in this area of environmental revegetation has been critical to our level of success. The challenges, climates, floods, droughts, bushfires and frosts have been a bit of a challenge for us as well. Foraging native fauna and addressing traditional views around land management. That has been a little bit of a challenge and that will be ongoing. And building in sustainability of the project by collection of local seeds and not having to rely so much on future grants to be able to fund any future plannings. Innovations, or perhaps common sense. Step outside your comfort zone, be prepared to adopt measures that require a leap of faith and allow doors to open. Our key learnings, probably the two, recognise the need and relevance are driving responses and also drive commitment amongst your neighbours and people whom you want involved. Build capacity and resilience. Allow those that have knowledge to lead and have patience to bring others along. That's some of the things in the pipeline, in our partnerships. And lastly, I want to acknowledge the help and support that we've had from various groups around us. Thank you.
How fantastic to see so many passionate landholders doing wonderful things. We're going to welcome back Stephen, Stacy, Tricia and Jan for our Q&A. Who's got burning questions? Or just questions, don't have to be burning. Just general, like comments. Yes, we've got some already. Hands up nice and high because we've got roaming mics there. Excellent. Who's first? Yep, brilliant. Up the back.
Stacy Mail, LS. I'm interested in more content on planting in dry seasons. You touched on that, Stacey. Do you have more material on that yourselves, or is there resources that you've looked at for planting in the dry? Techniques to get trees established before the next rains? I don't know if
Did we need?
Yeah, generally when you're planting on riverbanks or, into drier areas, long stem tube stock can be a good option. But I don't think, Judy, you might want to back me up on this one. I don't think that the plants were particularly grown specifically for long stem in this case. Some were. Okay.
Problem sourcing. we had problems sourcing plants, so we got as many long stems as we could. But because there was a very large variation of species that we were sorting of trees, probably about 30 or 40 different ones, the trees, the different canopies, that we just had to deal with what we got. We had to put off the planting. I had to look after the trees for about a year before we had the right situation where we could plant. And then as Stacy said, we planted with a very good technique, which took a long time, but it was well worthwhile, so we didn't ever have to water during the drought.
Thanks, Judy.
Yeah, often on community planting days, the holes, aren't adequate, and we're in a hurry to get a lot in, but I think it is worth making that time to do it properly.
We've got a question at the back, but if you've got a question, if you could just give us a, yep, there's one over here, so we'll go here and then there. Yep. No? Yes, in that order? Okay, here first.
Hi, that was great. Very, very inspiring. My question is around, you all mentioned collaborations and partnerships, and they're hard work. They take time and they take effort, and it takes someone to hold those relationships. So I just want to hear your thoughts on, the future of the Hunter River and future partnerships and projects, and what some of those key ingredients might be looking forward.
Yes, well, today's a good start, isn't it? We've got a whole range of people here, and I hope the partnerships do continue, because that's what's needed. We can't do it in isolation. We've got to do it in partnerships, and if government recognises that and we recognise it, we can form a partnership that will really work.
I'd just like to add to that, because we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done thus far in our valley without the various partnerships and being able to call on the expertise of others. We just did not have the knowledge to be able to do, and we've been given direction. And so, yes, collaboration and partnerships are really, as you pointed out, are important, and I acknowledge what you've talked about in terms of holding them together. We've been able in our valley to form our association, and various people at various times have stepped up to take leadership of various projects. So that's how we've been able to manage it thus far.
I'll just add, we risk wasting our time if we don't form those partnerships. So although it takes a lot of effort, we'll just end up building sandcastles, and I'm going to use that analogy forever. Sure. Yeah, so we have to, because otherwise what we do won't be effective.
Beautiful. Excellent. At the back.
And on that note before about planting through droughts and things, did any of the groups use terracotta? Was that in your planting?
We used a fertiliser that was developed by Angus Stewart, just a small amount, but I'm also a member of the Budgie Beach Dune Care, and we use terracotta quite extensively in our plantings.
Yeah, any more? We've got 2 more questions.
Can I add to planting in the dry? So we're currently just holding off some of our plants in the nursery because it's easier to water in the nursery than it is in the field. And sometimes we just need our funding bodies to say, okay, you've got a 3-year extension. You're wasting your time planting in the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm. All right, we did have another question there I saw. Now I've lost them. No? Left of field questions, media training, I don't know, how do you find a Bruce, how do you find a Judy, how do you tell compelling, nope, good, we're keeping good.
I can fill in some time and ask
Thank
questions.
you, John.
I'm interested in the question of genetics. Where, for the last 40 years or so, I've been diligently collecting provenance seed and using in Landcare projects. But in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a much greater emphasis, both in plants and animals, on translocation of genetic material and well, we all know about the concept of hybrid vigour, but there's a greater appetite to introduce external genetic material for improved hybrid vigour and resilience against climate change. You got any thoughts and comments on that?
Tricia? I think you and John need a podcast, just saying.
So I might put on my other hat at the moment. So I'm also a practitioner engagement facilitator with the Botanic Gardens of Sydney. And we've got this project called Restore and Renew, where for hundreds of species, we're collecting the kind of genetic information for many species. So you can actually look up what your species is and you find out. So we make generalisations about what is local. And for many of our widespread trees, locals is New South Wales. And so for other species, local may be 25 kilometres or 200 metres. And what we're learning is that we can't make generalisations, but thankfully the genetic tools are improving so much that we can get this data for hundreds of species easily. If that answers the question.
You guys need to talk.
Sorry, I have a question after Tricia. How important is that genetic information, like to the everyday Landcare type re-veg project?
Very, particularly for all our koala re-veg projects where we're planting thousands of trees sourced from 1 or 2 parent plants. We end up with trees that are not going to produce viable offspring, or they're going to produce hybrid species that the koalas may not like eating. So it's important.
Brilliant. Did we want one more, Mandy? Oh, yes, we've got one more. Microphone's not been switched off, so let's just keep going.
Hello. I just wanted to address a question maybe to Trish and Jan specifically. Is something that's not often mentioned is the social capital value in landowners working together, particularly in natural disaster responses and in the floods through Wollombi. I've heard some interesting stories come out of that where landowners have just created their own community to deal with that, apart from all the other things. So maybe Trish and Jan.
I guess, as I outlined in our at the beginning of my talk, we were geographically defined in a valley. We all knew to wave to each other, and we all knew who belonged to that car, and et cetera, but we didn't always necessarily connect on a close level. As I said, there were pockets within the valley who did interact more. Those natural disasters brought us very close together and gave us a common goal. Approaching that common goal hasn't always been the same, but has given us a common goal and has given us enormous social and emotional support in our valley. We have a number of permanent residents, and with it, like last night, for instance, with that storm that came through, on the WhatsApp connection straight away, what's happening up there? Is everyone all right? How much rain has there been? Power's out, and my modem's gone, I've got a spare one. So, it has brought up that level of emotional and social support in our valley to a wonderful level. Wonderful.
Yeah, and I guess we've seen similar. I can see Wendy Lawson hiding back there. Wendy was our president for 20 years. And so our Landcare group is our social connection. We are friends. And after the floods, there was a lot of effort put into creating resilience committees. And I kind of felt like that's what our Landcare group was already doing. So we were already looking out for each other and checking in.
Oh, I'm just seeing if maybe one more. Maybe this is our final one. I feel like we could stay here for a long time, but maybe we need our own WhatsApp group after this.
Just a question about local provenance again. I'm just wondering how important or critical that is. For example, we got hold of about 30 tube stocks of Australian cedar. Now, they certainly weren't local. They were from northern rivers. At one time, there would have been cedars in the Hunter Valley, but not so much now. So how is that right or wrong, or is something better than nothing? Or?
It's one that I wish we had a source of seed in the Hunter. We've probably lost most of it. So what would be left is there someone putting to say? So yeah, it's important that if you can, I guess, it's one that is on the list to be looked at eventually. But I guess don't source it. Source it from as close as you can. And so it's important, but we're constrained by the fact that we cleared most of it from the Hunter. Renee, was that a comment there?
Sorry, Renee. No?
No. Renee's shaking her head. No, she's standing. Yeah, excellent.
Thank you for that improv. My name's Renee. I'm from Maitland Heritage Guardians. Anybody that knows Maitland knows that there was red cedars all through there, and we're coming up to 200 years since the last one was actually cut down. Maitland Heritage Guardians has actually started a project in partnership with Stacy with Landcare up there and a few other partners to try and replant red cedar or dry rainforest in Maitland. It's not going to happen overnight, and I think, we all learnt that here today. So we do have plans on the next 4 years. We'll be building a canopy, and we hope that in 2029 we'll be able to plant that understory of red cedar. So if anyone would like to get on board, I'm thinking that's what Jan was making me do, is spruik our project. If you'd like to get on Facebook and get on Maitland Heritage Guardians and join us there, you can even become a member and help us along the journey. We'd really appreciate that.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Jan.
Wonderful plug. We're going to tie up this session with a beautiful bow now and some special gifts for our wonderful presenters. What an amazing session. Please give them your gratitude and thanks.